All right, my name's Kevin Hensley. I was in the United States Air Force from 1995 until 2015. I retired as a security forces member. I deployed 8 times to the Middle East, Operation Southern Watch, Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, Operation New Dawn, um, and uh, upon my retirement, I noticed some things were going on, some changes were going on. It's kind of like when you work at something for so long, and it just once you stop and retire, it's kind of like the bottom falls out a little bit on you. But was going through some things. In 2017, I had a lung biopsy performed in Vanderbilt University, and found out I had constrictive bronchiolitis. That led me to a SERA scan. Imaging location in SPEC scan in Littleton, Colorado in 2018. I found out I had what's called toxic encephalopathy, which is like 90% of my brain was deprived of oxygen, along with mild TBI, anxiety, depression, and also some PTSD. At that time, I really didn't know what to do with it, so I was kind of spinning around trying to figure out what was going on. Plus, going up and down with the VA about compensation and pension interviews or appointments. And then, lo and behold, through Burn Pit 360, an organization that we helped get the PACT Act signed with back in in before then in 2021. We were talking to them, and they had said that they were trying this therapy called hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or better known as HBOT. So, uh, they said, well, with your SERA scan and with some things, you might be a good candidate to try this therapy. And I said, all right. So, one of the colleagues from Burn Pit 360, Will Weisner from now the Grunt Style Foundation, he went in 2021 around July timeframe, and he was telling me about it. We were in constant contact because I had linked up with North Star Hyperbarics and Neurology in Tucson, Arizona, as well, to see if I was a good candidate for the actual therapy. So he was going through it. I didn't want to kind of do the double dipping thing where we all just kind of like rushed into them and got with them. So I waited until September of 2021 and went down there after Labor Day to Tucson. Drove about 2,100 miles from Michigan, and I really didn't know what I was getting into. I just knew that it was non-surgical, no needles, non-invasive. I thought, why not? And that'll lead to another conversation, hopefully later on in this information here. But I figured, why not? So I drove down there, and I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't even know how to spell hyperbaric. I was spelling it wrong, hyperbolic or whatever at the time. So you go from that trying to get educated on this stuff and not really understanding what this thing is going to do or how this treatment is going to work for you. So I get down to Tucson. I go inside this multiplex chamber. This chamber had six, it could fit up to six people inside this thing. And I was fitted for a mask. One side of the mask brought in the oxygen, the other side of the mask took out the CO2, the carbon monoxide that we exhale. And we go in this chamber for roughly about 53 minutes, and that's getting the pressure up and the pressure back. So we're in this chamber. I'm basically sitting there in the chamber. I take some hard candy with me because I want to make sure my ears are popping, kind of like the same thing you do when you fly in an airplane. When people are chewing gum and stuff, well, you don't want to break the seal of the mask, kind of like your gas mask in the military. You don't want to break that seal. So I just chew on some hard candy, kind of get my jaws loosened up to make sure my ears were popping. And they basically told us that pain is bad and pressure is okay. As long as you're not feeling like a lot of pain associated with it, then we can continue on. So I did a few dives. I did my first dive, didn't really notice anything. Of course, I was going through a 3-hour time change. I had decided to do some other things to devote myself to this therapy, to make some changes in my life health wise as well. So you're going from 70-degree weather in September in Michigan to 118. You're going to a 3-hour time difference. You're making these different changes. And then now you're trying this therapy. So um, I went and did my first dive. I gave it, that one day. I just did it the first time, the first day. The second dive, I came back the next day and I was like, wow, I feel okay. I feel decent. Went in the second dive, and for the first time in probably about 10 years, I was able to take my first deep breath without having to stop. And it scared the crap out of me, man. It really just kind of threw me for a loop because I was waiting for that catch. I was waiting for that thing to say, that catch, and it didn't happen. And I was like, man, what is going on? And of course, hyperbarics, as I learned later on, is not normally for the lung, to treat lung issues and stuff like that. But, I'll take it, right? Why not? So, um, I did a couple more jives. Now I journaled every day. I did 2 a day, Monday through Friday, and then at 1.5 atmosphere, which is equivalent of about 22 feet under sea level. Of course, we weren't diving in the water. That's what they just call them, as dives, because it's for the Navy divers for the bends when they came up and they were having problems for that. And hyperbaric's been around since the mid 1600s. So now they're finding out that this has more implications than just the 14 approved FDA uh, allocations for it. And so I was like, wow, this is, if I'm taking my first deep breath in my second dive, what else is going to happen? I'm excited now, right? So they do an extensive blood panel on me, which I recommend to anybody, to get an extensive blood panel. It costs about $300 or $400. Most of your VAs may or may not do it right away, but if you ask for it, some will, some no. I don't know. But and I started to find out what was going on with my body as far as my levels of vitamins and deficiencies of other things, as well as I started to do um, a heavy metals test from Great Plains Laboratory in Kansas. We sent off urine sample and a hair sample, and we found out what kind of metals I was exposed to. Of course, most of the military were exposed to uranium. It's just one of them things, right? Especially if you're in a deployed location. I found out that I had a high quantity of tin, arsenic, uranium, and some other metals. And I also found out some deficiencies of B12 and, of course, vitamin D. It always seems to be like the military's thing is like vitamin D is we're deficient in. So, I went on some supplements to try and basically try to balance out those problems, those issues that were I was deficient in, right? Because why not? If you're feeling better, it's going to work no matter what. So I'm going through my dives, and about the 10th dive, I get to the 10th dive. Now, mind you, before that, I was having problems reading a page on a book and retaining what that page even said. So about my 10th dive, I was like, man, I'm feeling really good. I don't have a lot of aches and pains, like I did, but my arthritis and my back problems and stuff like that. So I started feeling pretty good. I didn't want to dip my toe into the whole holistic approach of everything holistic. I wanted to just try to take my time and learn about certain things because people talk about psychedelics, they talk about stem cell, they talk about ketamine, they talk about all this other stuff. So I was kind of like just one thing at a time. I was slowly going into it. So about my 10th dive, I grabbed the Oxygen Revolution, version 3 by Dr. Paul Hartz, and he's out of Louisiana. And I think this book is about 320 some pages, roughly, right? And I started reading it. And, what are you going to do in a chamber, right? For 53 minutes, you're just going to sit there because you can't bring anything, can't bring electronics in, you can't bring key fobs in. It's recommended that you don't do that. So I grabbed a book and I started reading the oxygen revolution. I wanted to figure out why this was working for me. Why was I feeling better? Those questions, right? So I grabbed the oxygen revolution and I read that thing cover to cover. and I was hooked. I was hooked. Now, mind you, it took me probably until my 30th dive or 40th dive before the time I finished it, but I wasn't targeting a certain amount, being like, hey, by this time I want to be done with this book, or this time I want to be done with that, right? So I read the Oxygen Revolution, the third version of it, the revised version, version 3, and I got hooked on understanding the brain tissue, the blood-brain barrier, um, all these things that were happening to why was I color-coded with all these different colors from Sarascan. So, I mean, I got really involved into this, and I'm like, if this is going to work for me, or if this is working for me, why not can it help others, and it's considered off label for the treatments for PTSD, TBI, traumatic brain injury, post traumatic stress. Um, but with the off label, we're finding it works for the onset of Parkinson's, MS, some would say autism, or ADHD, bipolar, just a myriad of off label uses that the FDA, I think, is worried that if they give us too many, then the pharmaceutical companies won't make any money, which, you know, um, to me, who cares? I'm sorry to say that, but who cares? Um, but I was on 48 pills, man, when I got out of the military and I met through the VA, and it was like a full-time job just trying to remember to take these pills at these certain times during the day, even if you had one of those little pill things, Sunday through Sunday or whatever, and you broke them. I just, no, it was a mess. Um, so by the time I got done with HBOT, I was down to, I think, 6 pills initially, and now I'm down to probably three. 3 pills that I take. I take a heartburn pill, I take a allergy pill, and um there's another one I just can't remember right offhand. So, I mean, from 48 to 3, that's a huge significant difference in the feeling better, starting your day off. You don't feel like you're in a drug factory when you open up the cupboard and you see all this stuff in there. So, um, about my 40th dive, I was in there, and we didn't have a plan. I had what's called an MRI DTI, which is kind of like um, a different way to see your brain through gray matter and through white matter. 44% of my white matter, I was deprived, or I was down to 44% of my white matter, which helps with balance, which makes a lot of sense. Why I got kind of take corners too fast and run into the corner or the edge of something and be like, darn it, why did I hit that thing, right? So a lot of things were making sense. A lot of things that were happening were answering those questions on why do I feel a certain way, and why is this happening to me? And excuse me. And so, um, I started diving into that with the neurologist there, Dr. Carol Hendricks, and her staff. I started to do a detox program of sauna treatments, of red light lens therapy. I did what's called PEMF, which is a pulse electromagnetic field, where it breaks up the scar tissue and helps kind of loosen that up a little bit, so your joints and your muscles and all that stuff can move around a little bit, especially if you've had surgeries. It's helpful for that. So I started doing different things. Um, and just to tell you, man, I just felt better. And this is the only treatment that I had. I did for first 40 dives, and she asked me how I was feeling. I said, "Well, I'm still a little foggy on some things. I'm still not 100% on everything." She said, "Well, we'll try to put you at 80 dives and see where you're at with the extent of what's going on with you. We'll just try 80 dives and we'll see. We'll reevaluate." She's probably like, "You need 110, but we'll try 80 and see where you're at." So I was going through there. I was starting to read more. I started to read the Doc, I Want My Brain Back, and the Miracle Workers of South Boulder Road, um, and some more books that talked about PTSD, talked about TBI, talked about treatments and things like that, and the successes that we're having. But more than that, the most impactful thing that I think happened was when I was in those chambers and people would come inside there, what happened with them too, you know? I can remember people in there. They had an accident victim that happened like 20 some years ago, and we were talking, and she had some pretty significant injuries, and she would bounce back and forth when she would sit down, kind of like the clock going back and forth, right? Kind of the swaying back and forth thing. So it was hard to communicate with her because we're trying to look eye to eye with each other, and she's bouncing back and forth. And she asked me, probably, within a couple dives, or, again, off and on, we'd see each other every once in a while. We would get in there. So I don't know what number dive she was at, but she asked me, she said, "Do you smell that?" And I'm like, "Smell what?" And she's like, "Do you smell that?" "I smell cigarette smoke." And I'm like, "I hope you don't. We're in a chamber with 100% oxygen. I really hope you don't smell cigarette smoke." But it took her back to that accident, to where her dad was smoking when she got into that accident. That was 20 some years ago, so the healing of the brain and bringing it back to where those injuries occurred, and then not only that, but reducing and mitigating those feelings of, ouch, this is painful, and it takes you right back to that situation that happened to you, and it could lead to night terrors, it could lead to a bunch of memory problems, it could enhance your PTSD, and it starts to bring you back to those things. But when you start treating like that, again, if you heal the brain, you heal the body, those memories start breaking up and they start reducing, and you're starting to be healed. So this, I'm telling you, Dr. Carol Hendricks and her team down at North Star Hyperbarics and Neurology, they're saints. She everybody that comes through there, she calls them her veterans, and she kind of takes ownership of them and stuff like that, and she's an angel. She's somebody that just wants to help people and wants to care and be there for people, because she's heard the horror stories. She's heard all these different things about what happens. And she was treating border patrol agents. She was treating police officers, first responders, veterans, just, anybody who would fit that criteria of what she was willing to treat off label as well as on label, to bring into her clinic. And just the people that I've seen there, the people that were thinking, having suicidal ideations, um, and they're the same person physically, but mentally they are a brand new. Some of them said, I would never ever do what I thought I was going to do in my life. I would never try to hurt myself ever. And it was just an amazing time. I did a cognitive function test. I was still lacking in some areas, but improved in other areas. I did what's called a right IQ test. At the beginning, I didn't feel like I did very well, but towards the end, it got better. It improved, and that's all you're trying to do, is you're trying to improve your situation. You're trying to feel better, and you're trying to get relief from those things that are bringing you down and causing you things like, your memory. You can't remember, um, what you wrote on a page on a book. You can't remember conversations that you had. You can't remember, they call it CRS, right? Can't remember, you know. So, but it just improved overall quality of life. It extended my life, so much so that I was able to bring that back, and then be able to keep going with the PACT Act, and get that PACT Act signed in 2022 into law, for for advocating for that. And then now here we are. Once that got signed into law, I started to transition into getting hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment for veterans with PTSD and TBI, for not only nationally, but looked at trying to get it within the states. Currently there's 13 states that have legislation passed, and Michigan's got some draft legislation that we're going through right now to try to get um, a pilot program set up for veterans in the state of Michigan. There's a national push for Congressman Murphy out of North Carolina, Senator Tuberville out of Alabama. There's a national push on that to try to get alternative evidence-based therapies into into the hands of these veterans to treat and heal. I'm sick of still hearing about 22 a day, and that needle has not moved. The only time that needle moved is when the VA took out the National Guard and the reserves, and it went from 22 to 17. But guess who we were deploying with? We were deploying with the National Guard and the reserves. So how are you taking them out of the situation that we're deploying with them to Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever we're going? So, and it went back up to 22 a day. And we've soaked billions and billions of dollars into this. And yes, it's getting people out, it's getting people different kind of therapies and talking about it and working through problems. I understand that, but we're not healing the brain. We can see stuff now. We can make the invisible visible. We have SPECT scans. We have things that can show you lung issues if you have respiratory problems and where your problems are in your lungs. We have the type of scans that can show you this stuff. So we're at the point now where we don't have invisible wounds anymore. Yes, you might not see them as I if I walk up to you, sorry. If I walk up to you, you will not see them, but they're visible in scans. You can get answers. You can provide yourself some hope. And, when you start sharing stories with people, you have, and they have similar issues, you kind of like become, kind of creates a little solidarity. You kind of like understand each other a little bit more. And it's not well, I've got this. Well, yeah, well, hold my beer, watch this. I got this, and it's not about that. It's about the fact that, and what are we going to do to help mitigate or solve those problems? We were always taught when we went to school, if you have a problem, come up with a solution, right? Okay. Or try to come up with a solution as best as possible. Well, we have 22 a day. We have reports from uh, centers in North Carolina that did 140 veterans in a study, and 57% of them, which is like 79.8, and I'll just round down to 79 for trying not to give credit for 80, but 79% or 57%, 79 out of 140 said that their pain is gone or reduced significantly. Suicidal ideations were gone. Man, if we could get to 50% on 22 a day and we can move a needle, would it be, why not? Why not? Wouldn't it be worth it to move that needle and drop those numbers? So why not?